feels so good. This is the Evil Offering lightly salted. The Offering is Evil's do-everything trail bike with 140 millimeters of rear wheel travel, and this one's spec'd with 150 fork. The bike I'm riding is the GX build. So as you'd expect, you get an Eagle GX drivetrain. As you may not expect, you get the Code RSC brakes, which is a really welcome sight to see. The Lyric Ultimate, and that new Super Deluxe Ultimate. So that's pretty great. I've already been playing with the bottom out as well as the compression settings, and it's feeling really good. The other cool features or part spec is the Enduro S wheels, so pretty good wheel set. A bike yoke dropper, race face Affect stem, and Evil's own boomstick aluminum handlebar. Lastly, the rubber. We got a Minion DHF here, but you get to see it in that max grip, so that's great, especially as things get wet around here. And another DHF, but with the Max Terra, make that rear tire last a little bit longer. So yeah, pretty killer build. Not a cheap build, but it's good to see the ultimate fork, rear shock, and those Code RSC brakes. Been a pretty big fan of Evil ever since my Evil Wreckoning version 2, but I haven't ridden this newer version of the Offering, and I really had limited experience on the first generation Evil Offering. So excited to get this out, give it a quick ride. Seeing as a bike like this, you have to, or it works well to get up before you get down. We'll start with the climbing. First thing I notice is a pretty good size reach on this bike. Set up with a 150 fork. I believe it's 485, which is big, especially because 2 of my last 3 bikes were down right at 470. The longer reach does a good job of stretching out a little bit. Still feels relatively, it still feels like a pretty good climbing position, but I do feel I have to put a little more weight on the front wheel. Maybe it's set up in the extra low. I'll have to check that out. All right, so starting with climbing, here comes the first switchback. Talked about it before, but switchbacks, traction. Those are 2 of my big climbing things. And efficiency. 3 big climbing things. Here's the big guy, the one that really works or doesn't. Pretty good. Definitely easier than the chainsaw that I rode here last weekend. But yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so after about an hour of climbing, some good switchbacks, some rocks. Here's what I think about the climbing of the Evil Offering Lightly Salted. This guy climbs much more like a trail bike than I was totally expecting. It's a bit more stretched out, but that's a pretty comfortable position. It does feel like you're sitting a bit more over the rear wheel, which doesn't always put the power down as well as I would like, but it's not bad. It's just different, and specifically with these more trail-oriented bikes, I'm able to move the bike around. It's not like a big enduro sled, so I don't mind the climbing position. It's comfy. Traction-wise, great. Efficiency, I've tried it with and without the switch. Definitely prefer it without the switch. Having my weight a little further back, every once in a while you hit a bump and you notice it. But overall, traction is good, efficiency is good, and it can carve its way around a pretty tight switchback. I was concerned the Offering would feel a little bit old compared to the Trek Fuel EX I've been riding. It did receive a small update in the form of being lightly salted, but what does that mean? Well, turns out it really just means it now has the SRAM universal derailleur hanger, and the shock spacers are shimmed so they don't fall out when you remove the shock bolts. There's also some new colors, but the geometry and ride are unchanged. So what does the geometry look like? Well, the reach is a very modern 485 or 491 reach for the size large that I'm riding, and may have me opt for the medium if I were to buy this bike. The stack is 632 or 637 and perfect in the steeps. The C-tube angle at 76 or 77 degrees is about what I'd want. The head angle is probably the most controversial, but for a 140 bike, 66.4 degrees or 65.8 degrees, it works. It's got super short 430 or 432 chainstays. That all adds up to a wheelbase of 1231 or 1233. The geometry lends itself to a super capable and fun ride. Now the fun stuff. I've never ridden this track before, so we'll see how the bike / I handle the surprises. Whew. Well, that was fast. That said, I think it's important to ride some similar terrain on the bikes, so if you watch the other videos, you'll recognize a bit of what's coming up. I was wrong. This bike didn't feel old or compromised compared to the Fuel EX, but it did offer a different ride. I noticed the C-tube angle, but that was easily remedied by putting it in the low rather than the extra low setting. Evil offers Works Components 1 and 1.5 degree angle headsets if you're really looking to slack the head tube out. The position on this bike feels immediately at home. I noted it feels long when climbing, but that is only compared to my current long-term bike. It is actually very comfortable, and when combined with a tall head tube, it feels great on the descents. And the traction is pretty noticeable. See if I can stay out of this rut. Oh, kind of got out. Woo! That was wild. Yeah. Let's talk about suspension. Weirdly enough, the 3 bikes I've ridden most recently are all designed by the same dude, Dave Weigel. But when Dave decided to start his own bike company, did he save the best for himself? The Delta system, or Dave's extra legitimate travel apparatus, is a linkage-driven single pivot designed around a very wide and stout main pivot, accompanied by super boost rear end to make a short, stiff, ultra-tunable suspension that attempts to make the most out of every inch of travel. Traction while climbing is there, and the climb switch is easily forgotten. Amazingly, traction while heavy on the brakes is also there, so if you get in over your head, you should be able to get out unscathed. A little faster speed here. Oh, I really like how this thing pumps around. Those short chainstays are noticeable. And for my riding style, the mid-stroke keeps the rear wheel glued to the ground over rocks and roots, but a little input from the rider allows you to get the bike off the ground or push into the backside and pop out with even more speed. Finally, if you overcook it and use the last little bit of travel, the dual progressive leverage rate curve ramps up to keep you from crumbling. I'm not going to say which design is the best, and it could be dependent on your area, but if everything I just said makes sense to you, then this might be the best for you. Ah, it feels so good. The Offering LS doesn't have some of the selling features of newer bikes, like the in-frame storage or size-specific rear end, but doesn't need it. I've touched on this before, but I like short chainstays. Hear me out. Longer chainstays should help with stability at higher speeds, as well as climbing position and traction on the climbs. The DaVinci also has super short chainstays. It should be a little different being a high pivot, but those short stays feel great on jumps, slapping corners and pumping over everything in sight. There could be some stability lost, but with the longer reach, tall head tube, and crazy traction, it wasn't something I noticed even when pushing it a bit outside its comfort zone. This bike generated tons of speed on flatter sections of trail, and on the steepest terrain, it was planted and felt perfect. Also, with the steep C-tube, it effectively lengthens the rear end while seated and offers a comfortable and centered climbing position. Altogether, short chainstays have a lot of benefits, and they may not be for everyone, but for a certain rider, they really make the ride unique. At the end of the day, I do wish it had in-frame storage, but as far as the rear end goes, I like it short. Who's this bike for? Well, trail riders everywhere. If you like to pedal but want to ride everything in sight, check out the Evil Offering. This isn't a bike you'll want for the bike park, and it's not going to make big moves for you. But if single track is your passion and fun is paramount, the Evil delivers. All right, so I did check, and I am riding this bike in the extra low mode. Which kind of became noticeable on the climbs with that seat angle not being quite as steep. As I said, it ripped those berms. Final thoughts on the Evil Offering, lightly salted. Descending on this bike is simply fun. I hear people talk about certain bikes as feeling like they have more travel than they actually do, and generally that comes across to me as the bike not feeling balanced. The frame feels like it can do more, but you're limited by the front end. The Offering is balanced. The progressive nature of the Delta suspension allows you to feel the bottom without feeling like your ankles are going to buckle. The traction is good off the top, and the sport in the mid-stroke rallies berms like a coked up cougar. The traction under braking is comparable to the DaVinci, and as things get wetter in my area, comparing the Evil to the Transition Spire, I actually feel better and in more control. The hydraulic bottom out on the new RockShox Super Deluxe does just what it should, and while it took me a bit longer to get the Lyric set up, by the time I was at the top of the Chief, I wasn't worried. For many riders with steeper trails, it may make sense to opt for the Works headset to get a slacker head angle, but it won't be necessary for every rider. I like having a bike that can handle this style of terrain and isn't afraid to rally along pedal. I rode some of my favorite moves with more control than ever before. This is really a testament to how well this bike handles as a complete package. The Dark Lord of single track, I love how Evil talks about their bikes, and the devil is in the details. That all adds up to a single track Slayer that is fun in every condition. Big lip for a little jump. Steep lip for also a little jump.